Could you tell me So, hello everyone. We are slowly going to get started um, with the third day of the conference. So, um, we really hope you had a good day and especially good evening yesterday. But now we are already at the last day of the event. So we're very happy to have Ana Mendez here today. So this session and then the next panel will be really dedicated to municipalism and to direct democracy more broadly. So just to remind a few housekeeping rules. So we'll try to be respecting of the times. Obviously, please respect each other and know that well, different positions can be expressed through questions, through comments, but always with respect, and also being aware of the time. No, so if you have a question, please ask a question. No, within a 1 or 2 minute time frame. So. For Ana Mendez we're very happy to have her. She has a lot of experience. She's an architect and urban planner, but also she's been active in municipalist movements for more than 20 years in Spain and in Europe abroad. So we're very happy to be able to listen to her today. She'll be discussing municipalism from a perspective of ecology of practices. So yeah, thank you very much, and now you have the floor.
Thank you. So thanks everybody. I know it's very challenging to wake up early in a Sunday morning after a party. I have to say that people in Madrid were very, my friends, my comrades were very dubious that there will be more than 10 people. So I just consider this a total success. So thanks a lot for being here. As Theo kindly said, we were discussing this. I'm an architect and urban planner from Madrid, but I have been involved in social movements since more than 20 years. I started working on social issues. We funded a militant research group called Observatorio Metropolitano that for 10 years published a series of books that wanted to do an intervention on the situation and to actually provide tools for social movements. Out of this, in 2014, we published a book called La Apuesta Municipalista. La Apuesta Municipalista was published the day after the party Podemos got 5 seats in the European elections, taking more or less the country by surprise. I was part of the group that proposed to do the municipalist platform in Madrid. The platform was Ganemos Madrid, that went together with Podemos Madrid to do Ahora Madrid. Okay, we went to the elections, and despite being called Ganemos, like Guanyem Barcelona and Ganemos Zaragoza and many other platforms across the country, we didn't really expect to win. I have to be honest about this, but we did. We won the government. My comrades, a bunch of unequal squatters and booksellers actually got into the government of the city of Madrid, capital of former empire. I was part of the government, advisor to the government for 2 years. And then 6 years ago, I started to do my PhD on the intersection of urban commons, municipalism, and planning. The reason why
Sorry, we don't listen
of
without the
municipalism.
Okay, so
don't listen without microphone.
could you raise all the voice or just?
Oh no, I can't raise my. I don't want to use the microphone, so you can either go closer or I can raise the voice. But I don't want to. You cannot hear me. Acoustic is not good. Ah, fuck. Okay.
So what do you prefer?
I think like for me the microphone works worse, and
Okay.
I personally, but I can use it. Yes, of
Let's
course.
see. Let's see.
But there's a lot of places in the front row, so
Yeah,
like suit yourselves. Okay, so
you're happy. Like,
thank you. Yeah, I did not. If no, it's sorry. That was a joke. I didn't expect. This is very loud. This is my normal. This is my normal voice, and this is how it sounds. So it's an F4. I can't. Okay.
okay, that's
Honestly.
so. Please, people, if you really don't hear at the back, you come at the front,
This.
and it will be
This. Okay, that's fine. So I was doing this PhD in the intersection of municipalism, urban commons, you will understand why in my presentation, and planning because I'm a planner, but also because, but this is another discussion, I truly believe that we need to make plans and make them happen. And yeah, that's what planning does. So basically, this is the short story. Um, I know this conference is called from theory to practice, but I'm going to do the other way around. I'm going to go from practice to theory. This is why I studied PhD, not because I was interested on studying a certain phenomena, but I was interested on trying to contribute to the municipalist movement with an explanation of what the hell is going on. And then, yeah, well, I might have achieved that or not. So, uh, basic information in the elections in 2015. Dozens of platforms, citizen-led platforms presented to the local elections in Spain. It was not only Barcelona, it was across the country. It included like very small villages of, I don't know, a few hundred people to the major cities in the country. And this is the constellation of platforms. As you see, very different logos, very different names all across the country. This came to be like the third political force in the country. If you count all the city councillors from these platforms, will account this third force. And yeah, I will explain later as well why it makes sense. While I was doing my thesis, I come across this text by Isabel Stengers. Is a philosopher of science from Belgium. She's worked with scientists, hard scientists like Nobel Prize Prigogine, and is part also of the actor network, let's say, framework. And there is a mistake, it's 2005. She writes this text called Introductory Notes on an Ecology of Practices. And one of the things that I like about this text is this quote where is, for me, it intersects with the prefigurative approach of municipalism, to look at the situation not as an analysis of what it is, but as a proposal of what can be in the future. And it is a tool for thinking. So as we take theoretical thinking as tools, that means that we apply them to the situation. And I think that what is important maybe on the discussion here is this definition or this kind of identification of what is that we have in common. What is this thing that will then make us part of a trans-international climate movement? Like, why would we do that? And what she proposes is to take a series of generic terms, so very conceptual terms, because those are the kind of tools that you might be able then to apply to different, well, she's a philosopher, can I say. The terms she are proposing, I think, are interesting. Is this having a cause? What is the technologies of belonging? The matter of challenge and diplomacy, empowerment and fostering, and then I'm going to do like a small kind of reflection on why I think this matters, thinking about ecologies and practices matters. So what we could see in municipalist process in Spain is that the cause was democracy. A cause is taken as the political desire and the political need to act on something. But this, but Isabel says, but she goes very much into obligations as well and responsibilities, is that you don't own a cause, you are part of it. It's like the other way around. It's not an object that then you take as a flag, it's something that you incorporate. You don't think without a cause, but you don't act without a cause neither. So, democracy. 4 years before, 2011, the camps in Spain started by a group. One of the groups involved in the organization of this demonstration was called Real Democracy Now. at the beginning, the demands of this group and the demands of the demonstration that took place in the 15th of May, and that's why we call the May 15 movement. It was very, like, honestly, so social democratic, simple. Like, can we please not have the people that have been convicted of corruption going in an electoral list? I mean, is this like too much to ask? This demonstration was 1 week before the local elections, and people were very, very pissed because one of the things that actually enable the housing bubble and the financial bubble in Spain was precisely the corruption cases in urban planning. So this was rampant across the country. People were fed up. People were fed up, like we were paying the consequences of the crisis. And the May 15 had three main lemmas. One was they call it a democracy, but it's not. It's not a crisis, it's a con. And we are not commodities in the hands of politicians and bankers. And this kind of defined the situation in very clear terms. Just to make an idea, a poll from El País journal, not a very radical publication, will publish that 80% of the population in Spain agree with the proposal and the ideas of the May 15. They didn't think they were revolutionary. They thought it was common sense. This is not a crisis. This is a con. The bankers are winning. We are saving them, and we are paying the price. What the hell? This is not working. The reason democracy was used is because democracy is governments as money are based on trust. We trust the system, and that's why we're allowed to be governed. Otherwise, things happen. And democracy in that moment, especially in Spain, put in crisis this trust and make a leverage for people that don't have any financial, economical, military power. Otherwise, this is a map of the camps in Spain. They really spread almost everywhere across the country. And by the way, the Occupy movement was a call by the Squares movement that they say, let's spread this, make it international on the 5th of October. Syntagma took first because there was this sign saying, what is the democracy in Greece is sleeping or something like this. And then Greeks decided something should be done. And then Occupy happened, along the way, together with some Spaniards that were there in New York by the time. So for context, as you know, Spain went through 40 years of dictatorship and military junta, and the end of it, the dictator died of natural causes. He appointed the king. Something happened. The new elections. We call this the culture of the transition. We did a peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. That's why democracy is also very relevant. Democracy is, for a long time, was not given for granted. There was a second attempt of military coup in 81. The Guardia Civil and the army, they got into the parliament. So there is this sense of there is this fragile democracy. We have to protect democracy. We have the democracy fighters against Franco that are now in the government as it happens, and don't touch my democracy, right? Like, and then that's why the reclaim of a true, real democracy was very powerful in that context, and in the context of austerity, and all the guts. This is an installation. I don't know the number, showing this is an installation of these are the four presidents of the democratic time turned down. No, like the May 15 broke the agreements of the transition, and one of them was a two-party system, right? Conservatives that reflect the two Spains. The nationalist Spain that was surviving after Franco and the Republican Spain, whatever. No? So we always have this imaginary of these two things, and May 15 totally break this. This is a map of our comrade in Barcelona, Arnau Monterde, and then he did a map of all the cities, more than 100,000 inhabitants in Spain that had a camp. All of them that had a municipalist platform, and all of the that then they got into the government. As you can see, all of them, all of the cities that had a camp had a municipalist platform, And some of them, 15 of them then went into the government, either having the mayor or being part just of the government with another things. So what we saw maybe in the municipalism is that the technology of belonging was the commons. This happened because this happened because the composition of these governments, the composition of the platform was very different, and the composition of the governments was also very. And some places, traditional left was a very important actor in the platform, maybe also in the government. All the governments were in minority in the plenary, all of them, Barcelona included, Madrid included, they all have to negotiate everything, and they got into the majority by the votes of the Socialist Party everywhere with different levels of negotiation. But this was the situation. We didn't have the majority. We had to negotiate everything, and all the actors in each of these platforms were very different, in very different compositions. So you could have municipalist governments, muni governments, that were not so municipalist after all. Like if you had Izquierda Unida in your government, you have a very statalist actor that is not really going for the commons. So how do we recognize those platforms, those governments, those actors inside the government that were coming from the original idea with the movement from the camps? Because we try to apply urban commoning, the commoning to the government. So while famously Elinor Ostrom speaks about governing the commons, we actually wanted to do this exercise of commoning the government and try to do a series of actions. This is this table is all those 15 municipalities that had municipalist actors inside, and how many of them participated in seminars that were specifically about the commons. The first let's say transnational, so translocal municipalist gathering in Spain was one that took place in Barcelona, was called Strengthening the Commons from Municipalism. So commons were at the heart of the policies, and commons were the way for us to imagine how we can make this governance of the resources available by the city council, like material and immaterial resources. How can we put them, that are accessible, that the decision is in a democratic way, that they are sustainable, and that we protect them against privatization? How are we going to do this? And then, of course, you have the normal array of things. So from making specific projects to making programs to re-municipalize services. And this happens in different. 7 of these city councils made specific policies that mention the commons. And this, I don't know if it's like amazing or too little. Like, I did like a thoughtful online, like we were talking about commons a lot. Commons were the theme and the background of the debates, of the municipalist debates a lot. But when you have to put it in a document, public document, official program or project, it's very difficult to articulate it. Because as we know, we have public law, private law, there is no common law. So when you want to do from the institution something to do with the commons, you have to take legal tools from these two things. Okay, the comrades in Naples try to hack the law. They're very good law scholars and incredible practitioners. And they're doing some experiments that are interesting. But this is what we got. And this other diagram actually tries to explain this relation between the meetings and the discussions and the specific policies. And then you could see that there was like basically a group of people, and this would be Madrid, Zaragoza, La Coruña, Barcelona, with some city councils here and there of the main cities that were really pushing for commons. Actually, the name of the platform in Barcelona is Barcelona en Común. So Barcelona in common says everything. Actually, their militants are called commons now. And this is like an analysis of what are the principles of the values of this. This is just, like academic thing to show that what I'm saying actually makes sense, and it comes from an analysis, not from the top of my head, and not from my desires, even if my desire when I was in the government was precisely to do this. So the other thing, so this is like the basic.
Again,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. It is in the paper. You have a PDF in the web. Okay, I forgot to include it. My PhD is in Creative Commons open source. If you go to the repository of the White Rose, you will have it. All this is there. Actually, I have a whole platform in the Open Science Framework, and you have even the diagrams before the diagrams. You have all the interviews that I did in Barcelona, in Berlin, in Belgrade, and in Brussels. They have been transcribed and they are also published. So you can do your own, you can do your own analysis on my analysis if you want. Also, all the documents are also uploaded, so you can also check the policies if you speak Spanish. So this, I think, is another part which is for me very relevant of the ecology of practices, and is because the composition of this platform was so diverse, they were also very complicated. So some people were statalists. They wanted to protect the state. They didn't want to develop the commons. Some people had some approaches to the commons. Some people thought the government should be more revolutionary. Some of them said, like, yeah, whatever, we have to administrate 3.5 million city people, and there are certain things that we have to do and that we have to do better, and that takes a lot of energy that maybe is not put on more revolutionary things. And I think that seeing these as a question of challenges and a question of diplomacies helps to clarify what are we doing and how are we doing it. So first, on the challenges, Stengers goes on these, all these are quotes from the paper. I'm not putting the pages because they very often come from the same page, so it was not really making sense. But again, this is open and you can download the article, is accessible. So how do we go beyond this idea of success and failure, left and right, revolution, reform, friend and enemy? Friend and enemy was a major issue when you got to the power. Like, are you with me? Are you against me? In front of me is like, it depends. I'm probably just like in the middle, or I'm trying to connect these two things. So how do we? So we don't want to homogenize everything, and we don't want to say everything is the same, but we have to sustain these contradictions and try to do a synthesis that allows the parts. So in a complex system will be, how do we keep the autonomy of the parts with the coherence of the whole? And that was like a constant work from the first meeting we did in July 2014 until the end of the government. So the contradictions, either or, are turned into contrast. We have this, and we have to operate, and some of us choose to operate in the middle of the two things. And the other thing that is very clear to me, and also happened from the beginning of the process, is that these contradictions can keep together because you have to negotiate. You have to do this act of diplomacy, but when you negotiate, you change. First, you put at risk things. Coming to agreements is not something that everybody agrees. You always can't give up things. But the second important thing is that you can't transform. And in relation with the government and with the state, in relation to the platforms, that mean that we had to accommodate different points of view and accept them and incorporate them. But in terms of the institution, is that you end up thinking as the institution and acting as the institution. And one this thing of the performance of the power is a precondition of being able to exercise that power. You are the government because you act as a government. And the contradictions between trying to change the institution and acting as the institution at the same time was there, like, yeah, all the time. And the other thing that I think it relates also to our concept of the commons and our concept of even of autonomy is that those obligations, those causes that makes us take a certain kind of responsibility are bindings that cannot be ignored, are co-responsibilities, are things that you have to live by and that binds and connect you to the other. So this was also like from the beginning, the municipalist movement in Spain, what you saw of the different logos, the different colors, different names, what happened is like we always also had this sense of even interdependence between the cities and between the territories. One very specific example is like the government of Madrid was, I think that if I'm talking about heterogeneous, different kind of factors, Madrid was the ultimate example of everything at the same time. And we were very often on the brink of crisis. And we personally asked the people that came from this background of social movements and the commons, very often we would say, it's not worth. Like, okay, whatever. We go home. Like this is it's really not working. And then our comrades from the rest of Spain say, like, hey, you cannot do that, because if Madrid is in crisis, we're sorry, this is how the way it is. The rest is in crisis. So your position, you are there because this is not good for all of us. And to a certain point, this is a responsibility. This is a step that we took all together. We decided to do this, and then like you stay. And this for me was also very important because I always say that if it was only Madrid, only the government of Madrid doing this, I don't think we will have last more than 1 year there. But it was not. It was a co-responsibility of pushing, political thing. So we come to the last one, which is a little bit more speculative and more on my side, which is can we take planning as empowerment and fostering? So empowerment here, Stengers goes a little bit, she's very fond of the neo-pagans, the Starhawk and all these people. So she leans on rituals. And but I think that there is something very interesting on the rituals that transform personal stakes into collective power. And the best example, and I think one of the inspirations as well of the municipalist movement was the anti-evictions platform, the PA, famous, internationally famous. Actually, the mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau, was the spokesperson for the PA. And the PA made this. The PA made in the middle like of the foreclosures, all the austerity policies, the pattern, the most like unlikely political actor, which were migrants with precarious jobs, with huge debt, into a very powerful political actor by making debt not an individual responsibility, but a collective realization of what was the cause of the crisis, how was enabled, and what were the consequences about it. And finally, fostering is about creating the pragmatic learnings. That means going again, it's not useful to think of these experiences as failure or success. I think the municipalist movement was incredibly ambitious. The ambition was to transform both the nation state and the capitalist system. And yes, we did fail. Yeah, I'm sorry to say. In 4 years, in a few cities in Spain, we didn't manage to overthrow the modern nation state and the capitalist system. I agree, but the ambition was there. So can we learn from it? Can we learn from how we didn't manage in order to do it better, to don't lose this ambition, but to try as we do. I mean, anybody 20 years in a social movement knows that we try and we try and we try and we try. So can we learn from that? And I think that there are many learnings. And one aspect that I am interested is in this transition between belonging to becoming, and to take this process on the turn of becoming something else. So in this becoming something else, of course, I don't know if it's here. No. So in this becoming something else, what happened is that if this horizon was, a transformation of the nation state into something more like a government in common, uh, everybody took steps that, if you look at the actual policies, look like social democratic normal policies, but it was like the farthest step that you could take in this specific situation, that then it changed very much from territory to territory, what was possible and what was not. There is an interesting exercise called Atlas del Cambio, which is, again in Spanish, like a compilation of all these policies that the governments thought that were representative of the new city. If we could have in 30 years this new municipalist city, what it would be made of all these projects, not and some of them has to do with food sovereignty and how you're like feeding the people from the productions that is local and ecological and fresh, and some of them has to do with ensuring accessibility to everybody to any kind of a space in the city. Some of them had to do with providing at that time the tiniest closest to a basic income, but to make sure that everybody had an income, to make sure that everybody had a house. So all these policies were somehow advancing in different places at the different times. Why I think I did my research finally in Barcelona, and one of the reasons why is because we always think of planning like something like making a new project, like making a new piece of the city. This is what usually is the imaginary of the planning, right? But that doesn't have to be so. I think that it should be something else. And what shapes the city and what creates the city is a whole other set of processes that is not only the built environment, is the social processes, economical processes, political processes. Same physical structure can host very different kind of situations. And it's interesting to look at Barcelona, because Barcelona cannot grow. Well, I mean, like, yeah, they got rid of the park, but more or less this is what you have. That's 1850. Cerdà made a plan for the whole city, is done. If you want to transform the city, you don't do it by mainly building new things. You do it by transforming what is there. And this makes a very big shift from planning as a project to planning as a process. And for us, the people that work with architecture and built environment and planning, I think it's a very, very big shift. Just to put it also very concrete, maybe two complex diagram that you nevertheless have it in more details in my thesis. I did a mapping of common processes, and the basic question of this mapping of actors and processes was, what is there that is creating communities or shared resources or common influence of governance? Not what is a commons, because if you ask what is a commons in a city, the answer is very depressing. It's like, yeah, in a few social centers and community gardens. Maybe there is a town bank. We can throw cooperatives in the back, but that's more or less it. But if you ask what is producing a common, what has the capacity or the potential to become a commons, then the question changes. And I think this was an approach that we took, or that the common, let's say, municipalist actors took in Spain, which was asking from the local government, what can we do to promote this kind of thing? So what ecology and social? Thanks. Okay. What ecology and social processes? First, and social practices is because the commons also had this ambition of becoming a form of social organization. And municipalism had also this ambition. So for me, always in this, let's say, discussion of making, and here I will agree with Stavros, what he said the other day, totally, on the decision of making very coherent, solid practices in small communities that are detached, that had like a political detachment, or making ambitious, doomed to fail propositions that propose a global system of organization, I will always go for the global system of organization, and much more so where we are in the path to +4 degrees. I think that's right now, it will change in the next year, maybe towards the end of the century. So the reason why we propose municipalism in the first place is because we thought that these experiments, we call it a way year, this experiment of transforming institutions could be better applied on the local level because it's the level that is closest to people and to their experiences and to their needs. But I would take it as an experiment. Like I will up the ante of the municipalist project to make it, like a mode of governance that is not about the scale, it's not about the locality, it's about how do you approach this kind of governance. So as I said, planning is a way to think of an alternative future and make it happen. It is planning and not mere management, where you are proposing another path of events. If the path of events that we have now are taken up to +4 degrees, I think that any effort is necessary to just change such a path. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was very interesting, and indeed from practice to theory, so reversing the trip.
Not the same theory. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
No. So now we have the question period, so we actually have a bit of extra time. So as yesterday, we encourage people that have not participated to raise their voice. So please feel free to ask questions now. We have about 20 minutes, so quite a good chunk of time to discuss all these ideas. So would anyone have any interventions or questions to start with?
People had a lot of questions.
Do you wanna take a round of questions or one by one?
No, but we can take like in 3 if you don't
Okay.
mind, so that we do a little bit of bunches. So
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so 3
So-
questions. We have already Krini and Elias, and okay, Mark. Perfect. So
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask a question about, or if you can talk a little bit more about what you said about from belonging to the path. And in what context do you refer to this? Are you talking about, is it general template? Are you talking about the governance, the people? How does this work?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. I was living in Madrid during this period. I
Wow.
was on the other side. I mean, I didn't join any municipalist movement at all. I had the option. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
But previously to studying and my final work for my degree was about kind of planning of the center of Madrid. And I had no hope for that. It was just like like a just theoretical, not theoretical, like an idea, like a dream.
Mhm.
And suddenly you won.
Mm.
So I say, oh, perfect. The municipalism won. Now I have, or we have the resources we lack. The reality was that, and that's what I want to ask. Uh, the people that won, I mean, all of you, they don't have any experience governing
Okay.
with the application and administrative, like practical stuff. You were too theoretical. So your answer to me and my institute to apply this project of agroecological gardening in the center of Madrid, blah blah blah,
Okay.
was like we don't know how to do this, you know.
Okay.
So it was like a very big failure for me, and I am very happy to hear some autocritic from you some years later. So my question is, how was this lack of experience really affect this difficult governing a 3 million people, as you say? I mean, the lack of experience from the outside, I felt it very real, you know, like these are my age, young people with a lot of knowledge and that read a lot of books, but don't know how to talk to the agency that moves the water to one place to another in order to have a garden, for example. That was my experience. So that's my
Okay.
question.
Okay.
how will you ensure that this ambition that you talked of is not lost? Was it a problem? Was there, did you fear that it just stops at these social democratic policies and doesn't go further? What could you do to hold up this ambition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to follow the order. So from belonging to becoming, it's a little bit of a philosophical question, right? I I find it politically very useful, the idea of a becoming. Yeah, of course, there we have the lesson Watari. There is an interesting also book by this Japanese philosopher, Jun Fujita, something, um, that he analyzes the three becomings of Teresa Guattari as a way to put an absolute limit to capitalism. And then we can think what is the becoming. So for me, the idea from belonging to becoming is in this context would be the exception. So the belonging with all the constraints and the obligations and the bindings of the commoning, no, as being part of that, being part of a community, your own specific community, but also being part of this commoning community in this in the form of a process of becoming. So not in the form in the context of planning will be not because we have a plan and the plan is this, but because in this case it would mean that you have to change. We have to change very fundamental principles of how we think the world will work. How do we want to organize together? How do we want to take decisions together? It has to shift. And in a very, like one of the specific examples of how the transformation that is needed will be this idea of, again, the dichotomy nature of the world and the dichotomy of judgment and understanding of the world. So for me, from belonging to becoming, in the commons will be from the belonging to the commoning community, let's say, to becoming commons of the whole city. And it's, again, maybe a question of ambition. Not only you become to a community, but you want to become something else.
I guess I was wondering, how did this shape your practice? Is this something reflection, or is it something that at the time was incorporated or shaped somehow your practice and your strategy? Sorry, I wasn't clear when I asked my question.
Yeah. I think we can talk about it later because it's a little bit complex. Sorry. Yeah, there's another turn. So experience. In my experience, it's not rocket science, honestly. Like I think that precisely the point is it was not a problem of experience, the problem of power. We didn't have the power to do these changes. It's not that we didn't have the experience. We did have much more experience than any of the politicians that were in charge before us. The politicians that were in charge before us were people from the party doing nothing but party politics for 20 years and arriving to this. Example, in case, local transport company. The local transport company is a position with a salary, let's say, of 90,000 euros a year. So you give it to your friends in your party. So usually the CEO of the local transport company is someone that has no knowledge about anything. On the other hand, we put Álvaro Hernández Heredia. Álvaro Hernández Heredia is a consultant on mobility, a PhD on mobility, does practical processes because works professionally in mobility, was the director of the Masters on Mobility in the university. Álvaro knew 1,000 times more about mobility and the management of mobility than any politician that came before him. Like, this is clear. It's not, I mean, it's complicated, yeah, but you have a lot of public workers that know the thing. Like, but if the public workers don't help you, if you have a 25 years of conservative and then neoliberal government, 25 years with the same party, with a very neoliberal structure, with half of the people against you, with all the media against you, and with all of the power of Madrid, which is 80% of the power of an economy like Spain, like people like, I don't know, Banco de Santander, FCC, like major global players that you are putting their capital accumulation in danger, it's not good about management. And I don't know who told you we don't know how to get the water there. I don't know who said this.
My experience was, my sensation was,
Your sensation was this?
yes, like
Yeah,
these
yeah.
two guys don't know what the fuck.
I know, because this is how you build, you diminish the trust in us. Again, a government is a question of trust. So you have to trust that they are knowing what they do. You have to trust that they are democratic. We are democratic more than the other guys. But then they mine the trust. So the whole, everything, the media was all the time. You don't know how to manage.
The media, come on.
No, but what I'm saying is even our comrades were saying this. When I'm saying this, I'm saying it to my comrades. And I'm saying it to the people in Uruguay. It's not rocket science, guys. It's really not. There is not a very super specific. Okay, go back. Go back to the camps. Why? And go back to the idea of agency. Why we thought it could be possible to run a city? It was also because people were running their own lives in a camp. For weeks and weeks, people were getting food, they were getting water, they were taking care of very violent situations, they were taking care of the media, they were also like attacked by the media, and people hold. And for 2 months, made this life that was self-sustained in the camps and realized that many things that you take for granted that you are not able to do, you're actually able to do. So honestly, like it might be that the feeling of your experience with the people that you talk, again, I don't know who exactly you talk with. Again, I have to say, the area of urban planning, as an urban planner, I was in culture, I was not in urban planning. The whole area of urban planning, I cried when they appointed the city councillor. And in order to survive for 4 years, I decided to make as if this whole area didn't exist, because I wouldn't have survived. If I have to be mad for everything that the city councillor did in the city, I would be in rage all the time. So that's not useful. So I decided not to take into consideration any of this area. And so what happened is our friends try to find a way around. Okay, if I want to do a city garden and the guy in the planning is an idiot, total idiot, I'm going to go to the environmental because I know that Ines is cool and their advisors are going to listen to me and the people working there are better. So you have to go around. So again, negotiations, a lot of diplomacy, and a lot of things at risk. So yeah, I'm not sorry about your experience, and I can't. But I think that even inside the social movement, the idea that we didn't know how to manage this thing is outrageous, in my opinion. How we can make that ambition is not lost is difficult. Again, we knew before, if you read La Apuesta Municipalista, we said before, we have learned from the Latin American governments that having the government doesn't mean to have the power. So the ambition has clear limits, and also the nation state is a monster, it's a machine. It's very difficult to change. I would say at that moment we kept the ambition by keeping thinking that the transformations that we wanted were possible to a certain point. Not everything everywhere at the same time, but in certain places for certain people. And in my opinion, the realization that we were doing things that worked. For me right now, the ambition will be, what is the next? How can we apply this in the next challenge that we have? Knowing that there will be, like diplomacies and risks and constraints and all things. This was Angela Davis, no? They said that you have to ask as if the revolution is possible, but you have to do it every day. Not like once, oh no, it failed, but it's a constant process.
Okay, we'll take the next round of questions. So we already had 2 hands, no? Theodoros, then you wanted to make us. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So Theodoros, then we had Emmet, and okay, we'll take maybe these two. So please try to keep it brief, and I will be the last comments questions.
Correct. So the municipalism in Spain was something out of the common for that moment because it was so successful. And knowing that Spanish society was an outgrowth of all the spirit of associationism and collectivism that persisted as a tradition. And maybe that's where its success was based. But this success was at the same time a blessing and a curse, in the sense that they were these municipalist parties, let's say coalitions, were catapulted into power without passing from the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a grounding in the social movements, in grassroots processes, in assemblies, but suddenly they had to form leadership that would take over the matters of the city. So my question is to what extent this leadership, by necessity or by choice, autonomized itself from the base and had to take important decisions without being accountable for it to a wider body and without having actual mandate in delegation, and without having rotation, which is another principle of municipalism. And what extent this, with the passing of years, with the pacification of the social movement that brought this to power, and with the disconnection of this new class from its base, to what extent this, let's say, new political class, radical but new political class, was professionalized and autonomized from its initial goal.
Interesting.
I would like to ask about mother and child negotiation style. Who is the mother? Who is the child?
Okay.
Is there a relationship in between giving unconditionally which side? Why? Mother and child negotiation means, what does it mean?
Did I mention mother child?
Yeah.
No, maybe it was my mistake pronouncing it. I don't think I used this. Mother child? No,
one of the negotiations.
Diplomacy?
Diplomacy maybe.
Diplomacy.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question comes as a comment to a previous question about not being aware how to manage things. And I have the sense that the question is not, or the comment is not about lacking the knowledge to manage, but lacking the knowledge of the power relations that were mediated. The power relations that needed to be countered in order to actually put forward your agenda. And this is leading me to my second comment. I wonder if a municipalist agenda has limitations imposed by the very sake of the infrastructures that need to be controlled and are necessary for urban reproduction, like water systems, sewage systems, electricity systems, housing. Who controls this? And my question was, what did you manage to control? And what didn't you manage to control and why?
Yeah. Are we good?
I think it's quite linked with questions before. Like somehow when you get into the like parliamentary politics, you need to have this dialectic with the movement, with the social base. No? And like, is step by step to show that it was getting farther and farther from like the municipality in Madrid, in Barcelona, and other said that for now came from social movements, but at some point was not able to accomplish the demands, no, or like these proposals that it was made by Como. And then also I want to ask like the perspective or like what the idea of this performative politics. Okay, there was something there were many limitations in the institutional perspective, but maybe through like direct action, through like taking like the space, taking some kind of like basic needs, and then after being able to work from the parliamentary and in diplomacy also. No, of course, like the power of the people is to make the pressure on the streets. You could see that 2017 with like the
independentist political, there was a big pressure on the street, and that was like the intention of building up this diplomacy. So the good relations.
Oh, wow. Tons of things there. I have a lot of say. Let's get diplomacy out of the way, because the other, I think I'm going to try to explain a little bit all of those aspects together, right? The diplomatic aspect, I think it's, for me, one of the more important elements of Stenger's is this idea of the risk. And actually she linked it to empowerment, but she says it's like, when you send someone to negotiate, this person puts something in risk. And this person has to be empowered by your community, but when you are there, in the act of negotiation, you have to change. And this we have to understand. It is not possible to make a negotiation without changing. This purity of the positions is very good if you don't want a composition to anybody else. If you just want assimilation. I'm like this, you want to be like me, you come and you are to me. But if you want to compose yourself, you have to change. So when you go to a diplomatic negotiation, and we have done this, my best example is with Podemos, which is a terrible beast, political statalist beast, and we negotiate with them. Madrid was the only place where Podemos said, Podemos was this main, like national party. Madrid is the only place where Podemos said, maybe we want to present ourselves in Madrid. And they had the power, they had the boss, they had the money, they had the representation, very powerful figures. And we were a bunch of, as I said, the squatters and booksellers, two people that actually were out of Izquierda Unida, because Izquierda Unida didn't want to present. And in Madrid, they presented as Izquierda Unida, but other people from Izquierda Unida presented with us. It was a mess. We didn't have much power, any structure behind us. And we went to these negotiations. And we had to trust that we had a collective decision of what were our limits, but the people there had to take decisions on the way, and they had to understand it, and they have to come back. You could apply it to the relation with in the inside-outside divide, which is another divide maybe we should rethink. And again, we try to put ourselves in the middle, me and my comrades. Like in this divide, you also have to make this diplomacy between someone has a demand, and then you go with the demand to this alien infrastructure and principles, and you have to negotiate with that. And in this negotiation, you change. And then when you come back, which is also important, it's like your community and this decision has to accept the change and has to incorporate the change also in them. And that is very hard, because you read it again as a failure. You went there to negotiate this and you were not able to do. This is a failure. And I totally get this thing like, guys, there is a new political class and you are the new elite and you are there. We call it, in Spain, it's called the headquarters of the city council. It's el Palacio de Comunicaciones. This is the official name. By someone called Palacios, actually. It's a very funny thing. The architect is called Palacios. So anyway, it's the palace. And between us, we said, are you going to the palace? So you go to the palace for this. So it really looks like you were taking the Winter Palace, but you were not. So it's kind of crazy, right? But when you go to the Winter Palace, it has certain kind of dynamics that are very, very difficult to translate to the people that are not there. This is one thing, and that is why this communication doesn't work. And the second thing is the sheer amount of density of information and decision making. That's another thing. It's impossible. If I want to communicate what I am living, someone will have to be with me 12 hours a day. It's not feasible. And it's also, there is questions of time, how times are different, but not exactly the same way. It's not that this is faster and this is slower, but it goes in very different ways. So there are certain difficulties. I'm writing also like a paper about, like a long report about this, but it will be in Spanish. So I can send it to you when I finish. So for me, this issue of diplomacy and the issue of the detachment are linked, but we have to face something. I was discussing with Mark yesterday. He asked, but do you also think, as Bookchin, that, okay, you go to the municipality, but you want to make a federation of assemblies? And my answer is like, I am sorry if this goes please don't read it in a constant way. But people truly don't want to make assemblies. I'm sorry. Not only people don't want to make assemblies, our comrades didn't want to get involved in the government. Many of them said, and this is conversation I have had myself, like, you go, you govern, and you do it right. This is your responsibility now. Don't go back to me, asking me to mobilize for everything. And there are things that you have to mobilize and that's work. I'm not saying you shouldn't mobilize. I'm not saying it is the social movement that push the changes. What I'm saying is that this idea that there is like a clear line that connects one thing with the other has many technological difficulties, like technology, not as technological in digital, but a kind of how are we going to work this in reality for a city of 3.5 million. But the other thing that I think is interesting on this, it was that we didn't, and this is important, we didn't agree. I mean, the program was done in common. I mean, I was part of the program group. We spoke with 400 people from the social movement. We did a design. We did an online platform. 30,000 people, more than that, contributed to the final program. In Barcelona, they did the whole Decidim participation platform is based on the Plan de Acción Municipal, so it's like the action plan. But there was not a kind of a consideration of the power dynamics and try to say, okay, guys, with the power that we have, we can do 3 big things, 10 million things, or 50 small things, because these are the fights that we can actually do, and we have to figure out, because otherwise what happens is like everybody thinks that their specific thing didn't go through. And we also have this feeling, so we spread thin, and then nothing gets done. So this agreement of what are we going to do first, and what happens if we cannot do this because it's too difficult, whatever, this was not done at the beginning, and it was not done through. This was our mistake. I would say we didn't manage. We didn't think how this would be. On the other hand, I also like on this inside outside, and there was always this dynamic of you're inside, we're outside, you're inside, we're outside. But I like Raquel Gutierrez. You know, Raquel Gutierrez is a Mexican sociologist working in Puebla. And Raquel said, but Ana, you're taking it wrong. Because you're always thinking the people in the institution are inside and the people in the social movements are outside, but actually the people in the social movement are inside your community and you are outside. And nobody treated us like we are in a jail. Like we are, this image in the Lord of the Rings where there is this huge castle and then there is someone and you make a breach and then you get into, and then you are surrounded by trolls. Like we were surrounded by trolls all the time. We were eating it alive. Like honestly, it was a question of power. Like, of course, yeah, we didn't have the power. Maybe we didn't understand how to get it. But
did you expect?
In this, I have an answer. I have an answer to this.
Yeah, but that's another question, and we can treat that later.
What I what I expect.
Keep that angriness.
What I expect is like while I'm there fighting in this breach in the wall, I'm trying with all my capacity and my will to throw things out, so that the people out has a respect. They are not under austerity. They have a better government. They have more space, and they can build a catapult that will go over me because I know I'm there only holding the space and fighting the trolls. I was expecting these people to overcome me and to make me redundant. This is what I was hoping. Too ambitious, because they didn't do it. It was not their fault or our fault. It's just that the situation was not like that. I made a bad reading. I honestly thought we could provide resources, space, and power enough so that people could empower and overcome us. And when it didn't happen, we were a little bit in the shit. I hope this answers a little bit the questions.
Heated debates. Thank you so much. Okay, for all of you that are really interested in those debates, the next panel actually is a direct continuation. So for now, we will have a small break if you want to go to the toilet, do whatever, but we come back 5 minutes maximum. I'm going to ask all the next panelists to come here to set up the technical aspects. Okay, so here in 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Yes. Muchas gracias. ¿Qué tal? Porque joder, ya ayer incluso se tenía mucha... Sí, ya no,
quiere decir que dice la pasada, que esto fue hace 6 años.
Sí, sí, sí.
Me lo pongo en fatal. Mi Dios, casi.
Ya.
Pues es que, de verdad, es que la gente que está afuera dice que no construyen o sea, mis compas murieron en las camas populares.
No, ya, obviamente.
Súper, Germán Zapata es súper amigo mío.
Sí.
Este tipo es diario, abría el diario,
No.
estaba su cara en todos los periódicos. ¿Qué entonces esto?
Ya, obviamente.
Esto ha destruido vidas, nos ha dejado desgarrados y de repente es como, si sois unos inútiles que no podéis hacer mi jardín.
No, creo que, a ver si va a surgir ese debate cuando habláis más de manera más tranquila después.
No.
Yo creo
No es un
que,
debate.
bueno, ya no es un debate, sí,
Yo
claro.
estoy contando mi experiencia como lo veo yo. Si yo lo veo
No, pero es
distinto.
verdad que en España tienes como mucha, ya, bueno,
Yo le dije. Well, it's great. I mean, like, I don't really do curriculum. I'm more dedicated. But it's great that you do the common in that. It's very good. Totally. No, totally needed. Yeah, you need the community to change because yeah, that's okay. But that's very true. Honestly, yeah. Right. Sure. I mean, like, I can also share the slides.
oh, yes, no, okay, yes, of course. Yes, no, I mean, it's gonna be it's gonna take a lot of time. So, and I think with like the driving for the presentations, but maybe on one-to-one lessons.
Okay, tell me a minute. It's very much. And you're me. Oh, you like? Yeah, it's mother of my hair. It's true. Right. I'm very thank you.
No, I think everybody find it useful.
But
Let's see,
sorry, if I'm so abstract.
No, but it's exactly what you said. No, you start from your very concrete experience and you theorize on it. No, so you just finished your PhD then. Okay. And are you connected to A1 actually? Are you a supervisor or no?
No,
okay,
not at all.
okay.
Not at all. It's
So
like
you finished?
we have a common friend, and we're staying together in.
Okay. That's why. Okay. And
Tony Strad.
I don't know.
That is the geographer.
Okay.
From
Yeah.
here, the flag.
Yeah, that's good idea. Good idea. Yeah. So now you're finished with the PhD, and are you in Spain? Or are you doing in Spain or?
I did it in Sheffield.
Okay, Sheffield. Oh, really? We have a lot of people. I mean, two people from Sheffield.
In the
Now they're gone. Yes, they were working on anarchism and genealogy and feminist studies and that. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I know that Aziz, she was working on feminist ideology, I think, in Kurdistan, and her super.
Sheffield.
Exactly, Sheffield.
But I did my PhD in Sheffield.
So they're there.
But they're not here today.
No, they left. They left. They won't be here today. Yeah, but maybe I don't know. But are you?
I'm not there.
Okay. That's fine. You're not there anymore. Okay, sorry.
I'm very frustrated.
Ready to start?
Let's wait another minute for everyone to come in.
Okay, I will go there and get them then.
I think some principles.
Okay. You want a microphone? You can. Okay. Hello everyone. Thank you for interaction, minimum interactions. We will start the second panel on direct democracy. Okay. So one small announcement is that very unfortunately Thomas, that was supposed to be in this panel with us today, had, let's say, a family issue and had to go back to Stockholm for this emergency, to handle this emergency. So he's not with us today, but he provided us with his presentation that we will share with you. He also provided us with a link to an online accessible PDF with the book that he wrote that reflects what he wanted to present here on the citizen lobby. So we will share all that on the Telegram chat, and yeah, hope a good recovery to, I mean, a good management of his issue. So now we have in the end a panel of three people. We'll talk about municipalism at the Greek level, and then direct democracy at a more global, wider level. So without further ado, we'll give the floor to Theodoros. So presenters have 15 minutes, followed by question period of 5-10 minutes, and we have the lunch break around 12:30. Okay, so we respect the same rules as before, and yeah, I give you the floor now, Theodoros, for the first presentation.
Thank you. Let me start my timer. I've had an accident a few days before. It's pretty visible. I had a bike accident. I managed to land on my face, and I was very, very near to participation here, but in the very last moment, I decided to come. My problem was that what I'm going to present here is a polemic, and my concern was whether a polemic coming from someone who's obviously battered and bruised would like actually be credible. But I'm going to make an effort. So I will say many things that are unpopular. It wouldn't be polemic otherwise. I will do a lot of abstractions, simplifications, provocations, strawman arguments, the works. And I'm going to use the first person plural, we, although I know that this we is under construction. There's no subject yet of municipalism. To present myself a bit, my name is Theo, Theodoros Karyotis from Thessaloniki. I have been involved in social movements for a long time, mainly in grassroots movements, for example, for the socialization of water management in my city, in various social centers. I'm at the Solidarity Assembly of Viome, and recently we were setting up a tenants union. This is not just for like radical credentials. This is just so you understand where this reflection that I'm going to be offering comes from, what kind of experiences, all right? So I'm going to talk about municipalism and Greece, but many of these things that I'm going to say are generalizable to either to more contexts. The cycle of mobilization that started in 2008 in Greece and has produced a wealth of grassroots movements and proposals ran out of steam by 2016, 2017. It's open to interpretation. The social movements have since been in defensive mode. Many projects have been dissolved, others are merely surviving, and with the exception of occasional bouts of activity like the student movement, migrant solidarity, there's nothing going on. The movements are absent from the public space. What are the roots of this defeat? Many would attribute it to Syriza, the demobilizing effect of the Social Democrat Party. Others would attribute it to repression, which reached its apogee during the current government. But what I want to propose here that this is also attributed to an internal limit reached by the movements in Greece, which is owed to a certain lack of political imagination. Let me unpack all this. In my own experience, large parts of the grassroots movements between 2008 and 2016 encompassed two main tendencies. One was the more anarchistic, I don't call it anarchist, but anarchistic, and the other was the more institutional. The anarchistic tendency denied any attempt at institutional reform or legalization and legitimation of their activity. On the other side, the institutional tendency, they needed a reformist party. If Syriza didn't exist, they would need to invent it because there was no actual plan of social change apart from one that would come from the top down. Both tendencies failed to engage with actual institutional change from below. The first confused its autonomy with isolationism, and the second gave up autonomy altogether. So, there are many differences between these tendencies, but both rest on a similar, skewed, problematic conception of what political power is and what institutional change is. They both think that these both are top-down processes. One embraces top-down change, the other rejects it, but they don't understand what political power is what I'm saying here. What is missing is a dynamic grassroots movement that will not shy away from radical institutional reform while maintaining a bottom-up approach, a militant outlook, and a direct democratic ethos is my proposal. While we should prioritize the struggle for establishing and defending self-managed democratic alternatives from below, it is necessary also to wage a struggle within institutions, not only to defend past conquests that are now being attacked, but also to bring this grassroots ethos to the public debate and the limelight. As a social ecologist, we may criticize the current model of production of space, for example, like as Nikos said in his presentation the day before yesterday, or the model of waste management, as Federico said yesterday. But where are our proposals on how to intervene on them? We lack the processes through which this criticism can actually affect the decision-making processes that affect our everyday lives. So the program of libertarian municipalism is pretty self-evidently a very attractive proposal in this respect, as it combines both aspects. It builds power in place and then uses this popular power to change our lives, including the institutions, without expecting a reformist party or a vanguard to effect this change from the top down. The problem is that in Greece, this kind of conception is totally minoritarian. It's wedged between two powerful traditions and political spaces. And so the people that are inspired by self-management, social ecology, political autonomy, they have not managed to produce their own political program. And largely, they remain within the confines of what we call the anarchist movement. Now, the anarchist movement, I'm going to be very harsh now and criticize it, the Greek anarchist movement. Some of its criticism can be applied to other movements in other countries. It has a problem of understanding what political power is. It confounds political power with the state. They're not the same thing. The state is a specific configuration of political power. Political power is not inherently repressive and dominating. It's a prerequisite in some sense of social existence. The anarchist movement fails to distinguish between representation and delegation. So it ends up holding some individual stance, like no one is going to tell me what to do, but it defends this individual stance in a collectivist way. It confounds resurrection with revolution. Revolution is actual change. There is a missing link between the two. Insurrection, revolution, what lies between the two? I don't want to expand because I don't have much time. And the anarchist movement largely reproduces the party form, not electoral party form, but it's still a party, a non-electoral party, the anarchist groups. So in municipalist tactics in Greece, wherever they have emerged, they have been inspired more by leftist than by libertarian ideas. Because elections is a no-no, is a taboo for the anarchists. However, the leftist conception of municipalist politics is significantly different to the municipalist ideal, especially in regard to democratic devolution and decentralization. The municipalists think that the municipality as an anti-statist level of government should take on more competencies regarding planning, participation, welfare. On the other hand, leftists reject this devolution. They believe that this is the backdoor of neoliberalism. Also, the left distrusts popular involvement and self-management. I have found out myself through my participation in a political party, left-wing political party, not municipalist, in Thessaloniki. And the organizational thinking of the left cannot break free from the party form. They are competing vanguards and parties at all levels. And they embrace political representation. Municipalism is not about representation, it's about delegation, rotation, revocability. So the role of these powerful traditions that inform our thinking and our values in Greece is very dubious in that respect. They are spaces of solidarity, they're good at waging defensive struggles that no one else is willing to wage, like migrant solidarity, but they lack any strategic vision on social change and they keep repeating the same recipes, hoping to get a different outcome. A vision of a true municipalist party would be a federation of neighborhood assemblies with actual grassroots procedures. And okay, if we read a bit of like Mari Buxing, we can see the whole plan laid out on how these are going to be confederated and take on more competencies that will ensure popular power. But we're very, very far from there. This is not what I propose right now. To overcome the impasse where we find ourselves right now, we need three complementary methods. One is prefiguration. Municipalism does not in any form mean of autonomy. It means exactly the contrary. It means reinforcing the grassroots alternatives, building the autonomy, sharpening the radical imagination, creating alternatives in all spheres of life based on equality, solidarity, and care. These are prerequisites of municipalism. They're not afterthoughts. And however, we should overcome a specific conception of autonomy as isolation. There's no merit in purity and marginality. That's why I needed this pen. Because I wanted to show you what I mean by this. If you ask some people involved in autonomy movements, they think that this is capitalism and this is autonomy. And here my project is here. This is very far from the truth. Our autonomous project is here. We live within a capitalist system. We cannot pretend that we can impose our values and our ways of organizing because we are all inserted into capitalist relations. And these capitalist relations are constantly attacking, not physically attacking, but in a sense of learned dispositions, subjective dispositions, our project. And if we think that we're independent from that, we think that we can close off this border and create our autonomy here. This is not my idea of autonomy. The idea of autonomy is counteract this capitalist system with our own values. This is not a wall. This is a front line. So this is the interesting thing. We can make many interesting things here within our autonomy. And it will be lovely, and we have made many advances. But if we are not playing in the margins on what is the mainstream and what is the political, what is the capitalist system offering us, and try to infect it with our values, I don't think that autonomy can act as a political strategy for social change. So this is one component. The second component to overcome our impasse is counter-hegemony. A strong word, but I'm going to explain what I mean. We should build an inclusive and diverse we. we should overcome the idea of a pure homogeneous revolutionary subject that is we're all like social ecologists or we're anarchists or we're workers or we're feminists, etc. There is no such thing in real life. The subject of radical politics is plural, is messy, it's contradictory, it contains conflicts and contradictions that should not necessarily be resolved before we start a revolutionary endeavor. So synthesis of identities, demands, interests is an objective of this municipalist project. And otherwise, there is a danger of reifying community. Actually, instead of using it as a tool, use it to close off a social group. So the revolutionary society will not be possible unless a critical mass of people can see themselves in it. So we need the creation of a plural framework and the integration of contradictory identities and interests. This doesn't mean that all identities and interests are welcome, but this means that the subject of municipalism is always contingent, it's contextual. It cannot be resolved theoretically on paper who is inside and who is outside. It's a process of constant negotiation. So politics is by definition the capacity to synthesize, compromise, negotiate. There is no polis that is not already divided. Give me more. That is not already divided by conflicting interests. And the third strand is an antagonistic reformism. This means that the will to reform the current institution, the will to reform the institutions without identifying with them. So we need to keep the conflict open and use the counterpower provided by this conflict to institutionally safeguard our conquests, however little the conquests are. So this discussion and this disgust and aversion towards institutional politics, for me, it's a bit elitist because we hold like the superior kind of politics, and these are all like clientelist relations and favoritism and power games, but we cannot allow ourselves the luxury of remaining outside it. So, to preempt some responses to all this, so you're talking about a form of municipal social democracy. No, I'm not talking about a municipal social democracy. This is a misunderstanding, which comes from a misunderstanding of what political power is. Our goal is not to humanize capitalism, it's to amplify the sphere of intervention of anti-capitalist alternatives while defending the commons against the attacks of state and market. Another objection would be, we should just make alternatives on the marginal system. When these multiply and proliferate, we do the revolution. But the neoliberal state is not the Fordist state. In the Fordist state, was dependent on our full insertion into the machinery of production. For the neoliberal state, we're surplus population, self-managed and self-organized all you want, as long as we don't claim political power. In itself, the self-management, without claiming political power, not state power, political power, is not necessary but not sufficient. And municipal politics were defeated wherever they were deployed. Another argument against what I'm saying. This is what Floral, for example, offered the examples of Barcelona, Venezuela. These are examples of failure, the activation of the movement. What is the concept of failure in different contexts? I mean, if you are involved in the radical social movement and your goal is social emancipation, failure is pretty much guaranteed, whatever your tactics. So we should qualify what failure is. And if you want to see real failure, you should come to Greece right now. It's a society that is beyond despair. We have crossed despair and we've gone to the other side. And you know what's in the other side of despair? It's alienation, isolation, social cannibalism, cynicism. Our goal now is not to reactivate the movement, it's to provide some sort of inspiration, some sort of pole of hope. Not the hope that Syriza have brought, the hope that's actually going to tell people here we're again, as people, as communities. Okay, and so concluding, My idea of this municipalist politics would be that the commons, the self-managing alternatives, our communities should forcefully enter the central political debate. There is no merit in maintaining our marginality and our purity. This grassroots ethos is much more popular than we think it is, but is not. We do not make enough effort to explain it, and we put it forward. So I hope that this will generate some discussions, and I could maybe some other panel I could give you exactly the arguments for the opposite. But now I wanted to generate this discussion.
Thank you so much, Theo. Do you want to stay for questions?
Yeah. What I'm doing all.
Oh, we can
presentation. Oh, whatever you want. Yeah. Okay.
One by one. We can do one round of 3 questions. We have 5-7 minutes. So okay, I have already 3 hands. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and then we will go to the next speaker.
First of all, I just wanted to know, I found what you said completely inspirational, very clear and inspirational. And I have 2 very specific questions that have to do with the limit. One is about capacity of people to engage in the kinds of experiments that such a space would do. And where if you bring in people that don't have a baseline capacity, you end up having more conflict that you can handle. And you're constantly in a loop of conflict and you're not actually doing anything else. And the other is the question of integrity. How much do you bring in before you lose integrity to such a degree that you're actually becoming similar to the mainstream? Those are the 2 questions that I have.
Yeah. We please gather more.
We have.
Please give me a piece of paper because sorry, me. I forget.
If you prefer, we one by one.
Inclusion and integrity. Yeah.
Conflict, the baseline capacity.
Thank you.
Baseline capacity to reduce conflict and also to support some minimal integrity.
I have not the same but similar experiences with you, but in others. I have been involved in municipal parties, but also in more grassroots anarchistic neighborhood initiatives. I was pretty much identified with most of your conclusions, but I have a question based on my experience. It's not a theoretical. It's not only theoretical. In Greece, in the last 30 years, the institution, meaning legal reforms having to do with municipalities, are towards a direction with more and more centralized municipal government, less representative representation based on elections. In Greece, let's say the stand global. Some other countries might have a better legal context and democratic municipalism can be more applicable. But in a context like this, that we have both experienced, your general framework, what does it do when the institution is more and more hostile towards democratic municipality?
So I'm curious to see if you found this from your own experience and in your research. So from my experience, which is similar here, but mostly from feminist groups and from neighborhood action in Athens, one conclusion I saw that people came to, they stopped believing that the negotiations you discussed, the negotiation, the collaborations, they stopped believing that this was actually possible. They felt they hit the limits. And at this point, instead of saying maybe it's time to explore the kind of new practices I discussed in terms of sustainable organizing, they naturalized this. And they said, this is the culture, this is our political culture, we're getting this human nature. Some people said all sorts of unexpected things about the limitation. This isn't possible. It's a romantic ideal, perhaps.
Who did that? The movements?
That moment when the limits were hit. So I'm curious to ask you, did you see this? And if this does exist, then how do we work with this to try to bring the transformations that you're discussing?
Yeah, very pertinent questions, all of them. Thank you. So, obviously, within such a municipalist project, you cannot have all identities, all interests. What I'm saying here is this is not something that can be resolved on paper, resolved theoretically, because this is something that normally these like anarchist or leftist vanguards want to do beforehand. Just put the limits of our action and of our subject before, define it very well, and then go out to the battlefield. What I propose is something much more open, but it's not totally open. And I would put the line, especially for Greece. In Greece, we are socialized around appropriation because of our particular history where there was never like a redistributive mechanisms and everything had to do with familial appropriation, small property, etc. The instinct of the people is the appropriation, the small scale for themselves and the family. And you can see it everywhere in the city. And the appropriation comes at all levels, from the top, like funds that come to take away the people's houses, constructors, up until the very last place where people like encroach on public space, or like a cafe owner puts out their chairs out on the pavement and preventing people from passing, for example. So that would be for me a good place to put the line. The municipal movement for me would be a movement of the users of the city against the proprietors of the city. Now, this is so abstract that it can be worked on the ground, but it will not. I will not divide the populations and the identities and like make a quick selection of who goes in and goes out beforehand. I don't know if this answers the question. And as far as integrity goes, this will be a problem. It will be a problem further down the road when we get where Anna went. But when we in my conception, what can happen in Greece now is enter into the municipal council with one or two councillors, and you will enter like a foreign body. You will enter like a combatant. You will enter in a constant conflict. It's not about, at least at first, it's not about negotiations and not about losing your integrity and negotiating your values. It's about defending what you have below you. That's why I did this like question that seemed hostile to Anna, although I found her like enthusiasm contagious and her presentation really, really valuable. Because I think that the municipalist movement should work very, very hard on preserving this link between the grassroots and the people who are doing this difficult political work. This should be a constant concern. And this means maybe that you should stretch yourself as far as your bed goes. I mean, you don't go for the government unless you can go for the government. That's why I said that what happened in Spain was precocious. As for the second, yeah, this is a very central issue. Some years ago, the current government changed the municipal laws to prevent all small parties from getting into power. This means inevitably that you need to make better alliances. You need better communication. You need to include more people. You need to inspire hope. You need to reach out. My experience, for example, with Thessaloniki's municipal party it's a very good example, very good experience, although this alliance includes many parties there that are not municipalist. They're very centralist, very statist, but overall is working with assemblies, it's intervening in the life of the city centrally, and it has managed to attract like the imagination of many Thessalonikians that are not necessarily in this political space. So I don't see any other way out of this other than getting out of our comfort zone, getting out of our specific movements, reaching out, addressing wider audiences. But this would happen anyway, even if you're not into the municipalist tactic. This you have to do anyway if you're in the social movements. And third, what you describe now is maybe what you're experiencing as Greek society as a whole, cynicism. Sorry, I don't have a response for that, in the sense that if I knew how to break out of cynicism, I wouldn't be in this state of despair myself, like doubting myself, doubting my whole trajectory in the social movements and like my political involvement of all these years and trying to find new ways forward. I'm sure that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who wants to break through this cynicism. So yeah, that's why we're here. That's why I came here, despite my like bike accident and my bruises, to work it out all together. I don't have a recipe. Of course, of course.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Theo. Now I have the speaker, Zdravko, that I okay.
Thanks.
So welcome, the floor is yours.
Yeah. It is nice to speak about direct democracy in Athens, and that is one of my main reasons why I choose to this topic, and also because uh, concerning gaining political power, we are maybe doing the things wrong. So the rules are rigged, and we are constantly playing by them, and then we lose, and then we are disappointed, demobilized, and in despair. So, what is my goal in this my presentation is that to encourage you to think of the capitalist democracy as obsolete and to delegitimize it as such in order to strive and struggle for something more on the field of democracy. The mainstream narrative in support of the limited indirect democracy goes like this. There are two basic types of democracy, direct and indirect. Direct democracy, even if desirable, it is unfeasible in any slightly larger community. For example, you will not have a square that can assembly 1 million people or more. And also, even if this was possible, if you have 1 million people discussing one single issue, then it can be prolonged for a year. So that's why, in practice, the only democratic option available is indirect democracy, and the direct democracy mechanism like citizen assemblies and referendums are understood as a supplement to the system of indirect democracy. And also to remind that even the revolutionary left ideas of democracy are semi-direct. For example, we will have citizens' assemblies which elect delegates who have imperative mandate, and you have the right to recall, but still they are representatives, and it is called delegative model of representation. So it is semi-direct and not quite direct, because wholesome direct democracy is judged as impossible. And that is a thesis that I want to question. And I will try to, my basic point is to show that mainstream narrative about indirect democracy has become obsolete, or at least vulnerable. Why? Due to technological, meaning digital advancements in the last 30 years. What the digital advancements? We now have a rapid information exchange and data transfers much far beyond what is needed to have voting and debates. We have capacities of data storage which are far more than needed to organize the process. And even providing every citizen with a device to enable him to vote, thanks, is not something that cannot be manageable in most countries in the world. And yet, even though there is a huge technological advancements, theory has not kept pace with technology. So, for example, this is not what has happened on the digital level in the last 5 years or 10 years. You have the process that is happening for 30 years, but theory is not questioning, is not asking whether these technological changes can provide us with answers to some old questions and old answers. So we are not doing that. Even revolutionary left, it is repeating the model of small communities. It's repeating, not me to repeat the idea, the ideas who were typical in the 19th century with delegative system of representation, imperative mandate, and the right of recall the delegates. So the possibility of large-scale direct democracy is largely ignored, not discussed, even though there is already an example, a practice of using digital technologies in practicing indirect democracy. The case in point is Estonia, which has held 13 elections already, enabling internet voting. On the last elections, more than half of the population of Estonia voted on the parliamentary elections through internet. So it is possible to use digital technology in order to make democracy. But why we are not thinking about such ideas? And I think the root of the problem on this issue and on many issues is the capitalist realism. Is us thinking that there is no alternative. And I would say here, for example, okay, every idea about direct democracy is nice, but we cannot implement it. So we are not doing that. I am saying, identifying a problem that I called Fukuyama disease. It means a person claiming that Fukuyama is not right to claim that there is end of the world, and then he acts as taking capitalism as given. So there is no alternative in his mind, even though he criticized Fukuyama before. So we are taking for granted capitalism, even though we are anti-capitalist in rhetoric. We are taking the representative democracy, indirect democracy as given because nothing else is possible. So here is my proposal, which is based on the classical revolutionary left ideas about direct democracy of Erich Fromm's proposal in his book Sane Society, and on the new digital context that we have now. This proposal maybe is not the best, but it is a proposal for a discussion. So the proposal has two basic mechanisms. In such a democracy, we can have two basic mechanisms. The first mechanism is on local issues. Local issues, we can organize citizen assemblies in direct democracy as in the classical model. And for workplaces, we can introduce self-management because self-management is democracy and is socialism at the same time. For the issues that affects the whole community, we can implement a remote internet voting, which I will emphasize again. It is not some isolated theory. It is a practice that was practiced for 13 times already in Estonia. Yeah. So everybody voting through internet, like in assembly, like in the legislative body. What about the discussions? The discussion, according to the proposal of Erich Fromm, can be organized by political independent body consisting of different political tendencies who would organize a discussion on specific issues, inviting experts, for example, if it is a medical issue on medical field, stakeholders, and also citizens chosen by lot. After the discussion, this political agency can list the arguments for and against the proposal, and all citizens can see the debates and also see the main arguments. And based on that, they can vote as a parliament. There is a possibility of a transition period if this idea is too radical. For example, it can be organized like a two-chamber system where the lower chamber will be the House of Commons, the House of Common People, deciding through remote internet voting, and the other chamber would be House of Representatives, elected like now it is, but on a level field, not like now that the process is rigged through the financial power of the capitalists. For decision to pass, both of the chambers should pass the decision, and even if the citizens are not interested in voting, then the House of Representatives can vote it, and you will have it the same system like we have it now. So it cannot be for certain so radical if somebody is scared from radicalness of the idea. One of the big problem is that in modern times, free time is scarce good. People don't have a lot of time now. This means that the working hours should be shortened, and there is no reason below capitalism reason to work so much. There is a lot of bullshit works, jobs, and so on. But also not only going on shortening working hours, but transforming the passive consumerist culture in free time, which is important, but I cannot go there too much. I will conclude by saying that in the altered digital context of 21st century, in direct democracy, the government by proxies has changed its status from inevitable to insufficient, restricted, dosed, castrated, outdated, and obsolete type of democracy. And today we need, even more than before, courage of thought and action in order to overcome capitalist realism, which is important in order to overcome the climate catastrophe that we are going towards. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now we have the same dynamic as before. No 3 questions. Please try to keep them short. We'll have Annie, Georgios, and I think you were so. Okay. You have a special right, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, special right. Okay. Then maybe okay. Okay. So yeah, okay. So please.
So my question is about whether this is fair, because not everyone in the world has the same access to digital equipment.
Yeah,
So
wait for the.
Yeah, maybe collect notes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zdravko, and thank you, Theo. Very good. You just reminded me that on Friday I said that we have to work on theory and practice. Very good. I really appreciate it. Many ideas, interesting. I will work on that while I finish my presentation. There are 2 or 3 questions, really. Ancient Athenian democracy did not only vote, sometimes they didn't vote. It was a form of consensus. The second thing had to do with what we mean by voting. Does voting resolve the social issue? I think problems are much more complicated and go beyond voting. Because voting means you vote 5, 6, 7 candidates or 5, 6 options. I'm not sure that I am for voting. That's why I never participate in the election. When you are at the workplace, it's quite different because you know your colleagues, you know exactly what you're fighting for, and you try to resolve or have some kind of consensus to proceed. And the last question is, to be sincere, I don't want a digital society where we vote for a government or a super government or a small government or a restricted government. I'm a bit confused on this. Thank you.
I guess a couple of points, questions. One is, as I've been listening to the conversations in here, what stands out to me is that people are talking about things that impact and are about law. And I'm wondering if there's a relationship between the community itself and people who want to make change and lawyers. Literally, is there a legal representative to interact with the law? Because if not, then how do you impact and change policy? So that's one part. Two, there's a movement within the democracy community at large, as was let out in the Athens Democracy Forum 2 weeks ago, and they're talking about deliberative democracy. It's the key word they're using. And they're also creating what they want to call the fourth branch of government, which is citizen forums. And I think that these are actually very important things to be aware of at the current point in time that we're at. If you want to create a direct democracy or you want to have any kind of bridge to that, this is the time to bring those ideas there. And this is the time to put your people there and have be part of that conversation. Because this is what they're actually talking about at that level. And then the final point is that I'm listening to the dialogues about creating direct democracy and his comment about the digital issue. And long ago, I had a conversation with somebody who was involved with the Occupy movement, and they said, direct democracy is great unless you don't control the media, and then whoever controls the media really controls the public consensus. So that's one aspect of it. But two, what's the culture you're creating? And why does somebody want to integrate their thoughts, ideas, and attitudes towards this? And if you, my point being is that if you don't have culture, then you don't have a following. If people can't commit a lifestyle to something, or can't understand how these things play out in their daily lives, then you don't have momentum. Is there any aspects of what you've explored about creating culture for municipalism or direct democracy? And if so, what would those look like?
Yeah. Okay. So on the issue of fairness, this is very unfair world. For example, some people, many millions of people live in countries that have dictatorships because that dictator is supported by some Western or imperialist power. So if this doesn't mean that if there is a possibility somewhere to progress on the issue of democracy or on the issue of socialism, for example, that it should be stopped just because not every country in the world can afford that in that moment. Even though I think that quite more people have in many countries has at least smartphones and something like that, that it is an issue. But I have said, providing every citizen with a device, it is the most complex of these problems, but it is not that it cannot be managed. For example, we are talking about countries that are wasting so much money on military. So this, if there is a will, no problem. On consensus, I totally agree. I totally agree. So maybe I wasn't clear in the aspect that the main mechanism should be the same old mechanism involving citizen assemblies and discussing. And I agree, if it is possible to consensus, that is the strategy. The question is what we should do on the issue of with the issues that are that cannot be decided in local assemblies. The old mechanism is to elect someone from us to represent us there and to discuss also. But we should have to know that this is also time-consuming process from the person, also for the person who is our representative. Double, he must assembly with people and then to assembly with them as a representative and then reports back. So we need to think about these cases. It is not that I'm throwing away the process of building consensus. What we haven't implemented this. For example, this idea in the 19th century, where people had more time, and this issue of time of modern capitalism is an issue by itself. But then they had more time, but now we don't have that much time. And to ask from the delegates to have this more time from their lives, and in the basic model, they are unpaid for this. Maybe it is impossible. And if it is possible, what to do? To accept representative democracy? That is my question, and that is why I think that maybe we should think about this. Unfortunately, maybe I have forgotten the main point about the law. This is something like the parliament becoming whole people. So not to have the parliament as a special body, but the whole people to become a parliament. So there is not someone who is supposed to communicate with the state, but the parliament has decided, and that is the decision, you know. So the elected as executive by this parliament, meaning the people, should implement the decisions. If this was your main point, and on the issue of deliberative democracy, yes, I agree that is very important to have a deliberative process and also building consensus. But how we can do it inside the system? So discussions, and that's why I mentioned why the process of organizing discussion is very important. I was a little bit rushing through the time, but there will be arguments presented by experts on the field, by stakeholders, and by citizens selected by lot. So, and after this process is done, there will be arguments for and arguments against. This list is presented to the population, the citizens, and they vote. So there is a deliberative element in this proposal also.
To go to that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
Just a tiny.
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have to move on. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. You have the next speaker? Yavor? Like. Yeah, I see that. Yes, yes, yes. Right. Here. It's from here. And then, I know it's. Wait to do that again.
While they're working it out, some of this is happening in Taiwan. Anybody
Why
who's
is it?
interested, look up V Taiwan.
No, don't worry. No, it's. There's need to plug in one. Okay, so coming with this. Okay, so what from here and I can change. Yeah, that you can do yourself. It's okay, more or less.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. It's great to be part of this wonderful panel because there are diverse perception of direct democracy, an issue that has been very important to me. I have dealt with it. I have written several books, but it was also an inseparable part of my activism. So the title of the paper that I'll present is called Internationalism and the Universal Sentiment Towards Direct Democracy. One of the reasons that in recent years I'm concerning this issue of the universal sentiment towards direct democracy, I'll say also from where this expression comes from. It's after some of my personal observations as a participant in social movements, as well as a person who reads about what is going on in other countries. And more recently, I had a dialogue with a couple of anarchists from the UK, whom I asked what is the condition of the movement there. And they told me that the movement is kind of shrinking, and especially the more libertarian tendencies are becoming more marginal, while a Stalinist type of virus is expanding in the movement. And when I say libertarian, and I don't specify what, it's because there's only one type of libertarian tradition. All this American thing regarding right libertarian is a joke. We cannot have a society with a minimal state which is libertarian, because minimal state means a police state. So having taken this out of the way, I was thinking about this tendency and thinking of a criticism that Bookchin have made of the state of the social movements, and especially the anti-authoritarian and libertarian ones, since his time enough and later on, where he suggests that today political illiteracy has reached appalling proportions and action has become a fetish as an end in itself. This is one of the reasons that I share to some degree his problematism with this, and that's why beyond of many things that I do, I also am greatly involved in the preparation of such conferences, in writing books, writing journals, maintaining websites, because exactly I try to keep this tradition of self-education. So the problem with this Stalinist realism is that it is a mirror of the capitalist realism that Mark Fisher speaks about. And Stalinist realism is basically the mirror of this capitalist realism. It says that the only alternative to capitalism is an authoritarian type of communist society. There is nothing else. And this is a kind of ironic, since they buy, the people that abide to this type of thinking, they make a terrible mistake by buying on the narrative of neoliberalism, that capitalism is anarchic, it's so free, so we need a strong hand to keep it in order. Don't forget that capitalism was enforced by blood. Karol Polanyi, in his magnum opus, The Great Transformation, suggests that it was imposed on other societies through imposed scarcity, through people dying from hunger, being deprived for means that they used for generations and generations to feed themselves. So it had to artificially dismantle communal structures around the world in different communities and to impose one specific structure that serves its purposes, and this is the nation state. Yesterday we had a wonderful presentation, an enlightening one, from Martin Lafoya, from one of the native tribes in the US, which exactly responded to this thing. It resonated with this observation of Karol Polanyi. He also suggests that there are hundreds of tribes, some of them grassrootsly democratic, some of them authoritarian and imperialist, but overall the colonizers imposed them a specific form that could guarantee the flow of capitalist business. So being myself animated from the socio-ecological school of thought, as well as that of social and individual autonomy as promoted by Castoriadis, I am very critical of such understandings. But what the Bookchin suggests, that there is no homogeneous society. All societies, in all societies, there are power struggles, not just in the economic field, but in all fields. Since ancient times until today, there is no a single type of society, homogeneous, something that some of the proponents of an ideology called multipolarity, multipolar world would like us to think. When political fraudster and Bonapartists like Putin or Modi suggested that leave us out of your globalization, our societies are conservative, very religious. Greece is also a very religious society, but we're here and discussing these things. We're struggling against this. So why we deny this agency to other societies? And I have been striving to communicate with scholars, researchers, and activists from other places around the world. And in recent years, I had very fruitful collaboration with people from the Pan-African movement. And I have learned a lot about the Caribbean movement. And me coming from a post-socialist country, I have transmitted to them also some of the experiences that we had in some of the post-socialist countries around Balkans, from where I come from Bulgaria. So one fascinating figure that maybe some of you know, but in general it's kind of like taken away from the spotlight that it deserves. It's this gentleman here, CLR James. Here, a young CLR James delivering a passionate speech at a crowd in London Square. He was a inspiring figure coming from the Caribbean. He was throughout his life he began as like a kind of Pan-African nationalist, moved through communism, Marxism, and became increasingly libertarian throughout his life because he belonged to what I like to call the democratic tradition. I make a further distinction from simply calling someone anarchist, leftist, or Marxist. There is a two-level distinction that I would say it's the democratic, and then there is the hegemonic. Someone can belong to the libertarian tradition and nonetheless abide to hegemonic tendencies. That is, tries to impose his ideology and make movements and context work for his specific attempt. We have this in Greece, we have it in many parts of the world where people are not really interested in the democratic current, which is actually empowering people and working with people and not imposing on them your ideology and your ideas, trying to open spaces for deliberation for the people. So being part, in my opinion, CLR James, of the democratic tradition, he increasingly recognized the sentiment, the universal sentiment towards democracy. It's a phrase that I borrow from him. He writes, workers in supposedly backward and underdeveloped societies of the global south are as inclined towards direct democracy as their counterparts in the so-called advanced countries. Oppressed people in societies that were subjected to colonial exploitation don't want to be governed by a homegrown elite, however honest and however progressive, but instead they desire to be themselves direct participants in the management of their life in common. And he concludes, those who are not prepared to seek ways and means to satisfy this world sentiment are inevitably driven to authoritarian laws with democratic covering, dictatorship undisguised, and ultimately violence against all the progressive elements in the population. Of course, when he speaks about this, he does not mean that all these people there claim direct democracy as their political proposal, but he nonetheless means that something that all of us here and most people that we meet outside, we don't want to be ordered around. We want to be left in peace. We want to be left to be able to communicate with our communities. So in this sense, what he tries to say is that don't try to impose on us what you already have, this nation states, this authoritarian capitalist model. Allow us to be free, just as you struggle for this. This was one of the reasons that he slowly departed from Trotskyism. And then...
Excuse me. Είναι στα αγγλικά μόνο η δήλωση.
Ναι.
Δεν θα γίνει μετάφραση.
Μπορεί να γίνει από κάποιο. Okay. So, another figure that is much less known But in my opinion, it should be made much widely known. And for this, I should thank my dear comrade Matthew Quest, who is related to the Pan-African movement, who has made a great effort of translating and distributing a collection of the works by Joseph Edwards. He was a Jamaican from the Rastafari and Root Boy dialect that he used in Jamaica. So Joseph Edwards was born as George Myers, and he also used the pseudonym Fundy the Caribbean Situationist. He was animated very much by situationism, by socialism or barbarie, and other French radicals. He was active in the 60s and the 70s mostly in Jamaica, and he was not a great leader of a revolutionary army or something. He was a rank and file activist. He was involved in organizing wildcat strikes and councils. He was a great opposition of the creation of the stabilization of a nation state, of electoral politics, and instead he called for a direct democracy and for Caribbean Federation of communes. He writes, colonized people have no intention of becoming only better fed slaves. The creation of a nation state is in no way a tool for anti-colonialism because it is a hierarchical form of social organization that cannot be seized by the masses themselves, but only in their name by someone else. And he suggestion said, anti-colonial struggle is being waged by the masses of the people to gain themselves direct control over all areas of life, and not only to the economic sphere and state-centered Marxism tends to imply. And this is this gentleman here, and behind him the map of the Caribbean. Unfortunately, he has been sent to oblivion purposefully by the dominant leftist organizations in Jamaica and many other people because his narrative was not suiting those seeking power. There are many other people today that continue this tradition. For example, this gentleman here, Dr. Modibo Kadalier, who has founded the Autonomous Institute of Direct Democracy in the US. He continues this tradition, and he suggests that direct democracy has an intimate aspect to it, in the sense that it is not something that is being done facelessly, like people voting in ballot box in elections, but it's something that you practice within the confines of your community, face to face with people that you meet, with faces that you can recognize. So he implies a direct a direct, non-mediated aspect to it. So it was not only these thinkers, but it's also the practice that is very important. For example, the Haitian Revolution is one of the most important revolutions that human history has known, but it was being taken to the side. It brought human rights to a universal level, something that we pride ourselves now, but it was not the French Revolution, it was the Haitian Revolution that pushed this. But not only that, we all the time hear about figures like Toussaint Louverture, who was one of the big leading figures, but different scholars and people who have written about the Haitian Revolution, they refer also for the creation of so-called organs of the people, which were basically popular assemblies being formed by former slaves who deliberated on public affairs with sagacity and energy. It was not only CLR James, who has often been blamed for, fitting a bit reality to him, but it was also from other sources. And although finally the Haitian Revolution became a state, and we see that a very failed state until today, that is pushed around by big powers because exactly they needed a statist partner, as we see today with Rojava, which is not the state, and that's why it's being attacked. It is not being recognized, although it wants to participate in global politics. It wants to be an actor, but it is not given this space. But I'll not speak a lot about Rojava because we spoke a lot yesterday. I would also like to turn your attention to Lebanon. Lebanon, we have this, stereotype that is being pushed by liberalism as well by Stalinist realism, and people often equate Middle Eastern Arab countries with being inherently conservative and Islamic. Even this disgusting derogative form, Islamo-Nazi, which was also used by some people to derogate people from Ukraine, calling them Ukraine Nazi, which is disgusting, trying again to conflate people and governments and stereotypes. So Lebanon, we had, I don't know if there are still more copies outside. We have a wonderful book about Lebanon, the revolution and the early stages of the revolution. Due to severe capitalist crisis, it was the grassroots that initially rebelled. They formed councils, they formed committees, and in this book, the author writes, referring to a report in a newspaper from the 70s, from the beginning of the revolution, where it was written, let me find exactly. The inhabitants of the slums and refugee camps surrounding the capital city of Beirut have taken control of their own communities, and the government authorities were unable to enter the belt of poverty for several months. With the inhabitants reclaiming their control over their habitat, they refuse to pay for rent or electricity. Instead, they give money over to the committees that administer theirs so that the basic services can be provided. So in order for months, the state power not be able to enter in these neighborhoods means that it was not some sects of activists, but it means that there was a popular participation, there was popular resistance. So once again, we see in other parts of the world, in very different contexts, again, people not wanting to be pushed around, not begging for conservative forces to take over, but actually trying to do something on their own. And I'll conclude by referring you, just to say for the photo, this is from 1971, an assembly of high school students in Beirut after one of the big marches. So this culture of assembly democracy was all over the place, and especially in Beirut. So don't be too rushed in equating Lebanese society with radical Islamists or with conservatism. It has its own internal struggles that should always be kept in mind. And finally, I'll take you back to the Balkans, and specifically to the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. As you know, in the Balkans, were under the Ottoman Empire for centuries. And the national liberation movements emerged. Greece was the first one to be liberated, and it was the first time that we saw internationalist brigades being formed and participating in the national liberation struggle. In 1821, long before the Spanish Civil War, people from Philhellenes, friends of Greeks, as they called themselves, inspired by the enlightenment of ancient Greece and the democracy, were traveling to fight here. But it is not what I would like to say. Later on, being in a conversation with Russian anarchists, many South Slavic people were influenced by radical ideas. I'll mention just a couple of names like Svetozar Markovic, like Hristo Botev, Mikhail Gergikov, who were radical libertarian socialists who envisioned a federation of zadrugas, or of popular self-managed communes, taking over the lands that were before that occupied by Ottoman Empire. Of course, this was not something that neither of the great powers wanted. Neither Russia wanted it, neither any of the Western ones. But nonetheless, these people spoke about federations and communes. And when the uprisings of the Bulgarians began in the 1870s, we see the emergence of the commune, animated by what they saw in Paris, in the Paris Commune, in the Aprilian revolt of 1876, in the city of Panagyuriste, a commune was formed where money was abolished, an effort for self-management was made, but it was brutally crushed by the Ottomans. Later on, in the struggle for autonomous Macedonia, in the framework of the Ilinden and Panagyuriste Preobrazhenie uprising, in the mountains of Stranja, there was created again a commune which lasted for 20 days, It was a radically revolutionary thing before the Makhnovist movement in Ukraine, which is considered the forefather of contemporary anarchist movement around the world. Long before many other things, here in the Balkans, we have this complex of inferiority. All these places, Lebanese activists with whom I speak, Pan-Africanist activists also have this, that we don't have any of this. So we are all the time focused on what happened in Paris, what happened in the US, in Seattle, and we forget to look what happened in our places and get empowerment from this. And so Strange was also brutally crushed. I would add that one the rebels did there was when they were expropriating goods from factories of the landowners before, they were not distributing it themselves like many communist guerrilla did in other parts of the world, becoming heroes, but they left it open. They go to the villages and say, it's open, distribute it yourself. And in a manner like the Makhnovists, they are not interested in management of the place. It's up to you to form your own autonomous administration. And of course, the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, CLR James, a black person from the Caribbean, was extremely inspired from this event, where we saw for last time until today the emergence of the Worker Council in its classic form. CLR James was fascinated because he saw people, workers, from a supposedly worker state resist the top-down bureaucratic management. And again, he saw this universal sentiment towards direct democracy. And in order to proceed forward, we have to acknowledge this, not to try to impose what we have here on other people, but together, brotherly, sisterly, proceed together. And I would close with just to say this is the flag of the guerrilla unit of the village in the heart of the Strange Mountain. It says freedom or death, and there is a small excerpt from a poetry verse from Hristo Botev, who was a libertarian socialist. And this became known as the flag of the commune of Strange. And I would like here to close with very great philosopher Jacques Rancière, and a quote from him: there are those who distribute equality and those who receive it. Once you start with that assumption, the hierarchy is already in place. It's too late to return to equality. Equality, instead of being the result of a political process, must be conceived as the presupposition of those who act. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yavor. So now you know the process. Now 3 questions. Priority to people that haven't spoken before. Questions and not comments. So 1 to 3 minutes. So, okay, who wants to start? Please. Okay, Theodoros first. Then any more questions, comments for Yavor?
You think I said it all? Maybe I said it all.
Yeah, exactly that. Okay, so then we can come back to it, and Theo, you can answer your first question. Comments.
So I appreciate all this work that you're doing, not only this presentation, but generally in your books, because it's like bringing to the foreground all these submerged undercurrents of human history that are linking human emancipation not to state building and not to nation building, but on actual community emancipation from the grassroots. What I want to put into question, which maybe something controversial, but it will bring somehow your presentation in conversation with mine, is this distinction between democratic and hegemonic. Okay, we know that hegemonic will link it to powers that want to somehow co-opt and integrate other smaller like powers within their framework. And so hegemony has some kind of coercion, but breaking out of hegemony, I would say, is not non-hegemonic, it's counter-hegemonic. So I don't see the distinction there. Let me make it clearer. When you were talking about these struggles, you were referring to the people. So the people were like rebelled, the people were against this, but creating the people in the first place, it takes this kind of movement where a submerged, a subdued, a subaltern group will be capable to generalize its identity and its interests and take a significant part of the population with them. This is a counter-hegemonic process. This is breaking a hegemony, breaking some parts of society from the hegemony of the state, of the nation, and taking them to the counter-hegemony of direct democracy. So I don't think that these are opposed notions. In my understanding, direct democracy should be counter-hegemonic, should be able to represent and to include and to integrate many, many different identities and in the margins, in the struggle with the hegemonic force, find its force, find the people, create the people out of it.
Okay, so when I speak of hegemonic, I speak of the imposition of domination. And this domination can have many forms. It can appear on a systemic scale where there is an elite imposing itself. It can exist also in a small communal scale within an assembly where a group of people can impose themselves on the rest, but still give the impression that they work democratically. All this conceptualization of the creation of a people, for me, problematic because, and I don't think in any of these cases, in these historic cases, there was created a people, something that especially in Marxist literature is being discussed a lot, how to create a people, because we need to create a state, or at least we think in this direction. In my opinion, when we speak of democratic tradition, of democratic politics, we mean the possibility of creating a public space and public understanding of time where many peoples can coexist. I don't think that there was ever in human history created a people in a society. All societies are amalgams of peoples. I remember when speaking with people from Marinaleda that even in Marinaleda, there was not a people that abide to democratic socialism and etc. There are even people that are not exactly part of this, or in Zapatistic societies, or on the Friday we saw this wonderful movie Belki Sibe about the Kurdistan, the struggle of the Kurdish movement and the society being formed in Rojava, where also we actually see couple of peoples coexisting and trying to and the struggle there of the democratic for the creation of democratic modernity, trying to find an institutional framework where these peoples can coexist. So in this sense, when I speak of democratic tradition, I speak pretty much of what Castoriadis refers to as the possibility of self-limitation and self-institution. That is finding the proper means to create the proper rules, because rules, yes, they limit some of your things, but they also open patterns for different ways of life. While hegemonic usually try to get rid of rules. It works dialectically. As higher you are on the social ladder, the lesser the rules imply to you. So in this sense, even ever since ancient Greek society, where it was actually poor people, peasants, trying to impose rules to uncontrolled tyranny of uncontrolled control. So in this sense, I see it in this way, trying to make a framework where many people can coexist, while hegemonic is more of the imposition of one people, one ideology, leading slowly to one flag, one specific mode. I mean, and to close with this, capitalism itself, while priding itself that is so diverse and open, etc., actually promotes one way of consumption, one way of production all over the world. It is a uniformity of unseen proportions.
Thank you very much. So, okay, we have maybe time for one very last question from someone that didn't speak before. So I see a question here. Yeah, so we'll try to keep it brief and that will be the end and then we go to the lunch. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you for your invitation. I'd like to ask a question because you referred to the Philhellenes as people who supported the revolution. And I'd like to ask you to help me solve this misconception that I may have.
like we have like the outcome of the revolution is the construction of the nation state that like the societal structure that it kind of imposes, the way I see it, is completely different than what is there. And not even geographically, the shift towards like a different locality that was not as densely populated or as important, kind of demonstrates how this enlightenment kind of exposes ideas and opposes like a structure that is the one that that exists afterwards. So how much did this enlightenment accompany a revolution or kind of impose or like colonize what was there?
Okay, uh, the case with these philhellenes, it's interesting. From what I have read so far, is that many of them were naive and did not have any significant part of the outcome of the revolution. Many of them were romantic poets who came here driven by a dream for freedom, etc. The people who played role were actually tribal leaders here in Greece who were backed either by Tsarist Russia or by the British Empire. So when I refer to these people, they are mostly people like I guess Lord Byron and people like that, who was Shelley, who are writing about the struggle of the Greeks, the struggle of all people that wants liberalism and democracy, people like that, like more idealists. People who shaped the revolution were totally different people. But nonetheless, even in so early as 1821, there were I have found information about an attempt of a commune in the island of Hydra, where local sailors, in a manner similar to the one in Kronstadt, many years later, attempted to. They actually rebelled against the local aristocracy, the large ship owners of the island. For those of you that don't know, Hydra was called back then the Small Britain. It had a huge fleet, a commercial fleet that played a great role in the revolution and the success, whatever happened afterwards, but like the liberation of Greece, they played role. And it was the sailors that, if I'm not mistaken, the name of him was Adonis Economou, who encouraged the sailors to rebel against the local ship owners and aristocracy, but it was short-lived. There is not really information I have searched so far. I hope I'll find in the future how it functioned for the short period that it lived, this experiment. And actually, he was killed shortly after. There was a departure of many of the ships with the sailors in them that supported him, because his base was by the dockers and the sailors. I hope I answered somehow to your.
Okay, thank you everyone from the panel. This was very interesting. I'm sure people will want to follow up those talks, but maybe with something to eat. One announcement very briefly. So we wanted to have the meeting of authors to discuss the publication of the book. So we will have it, but at 2, so rather than 1:30. Okay, so any participants, panelists, presenters that is interested can join us at 2 in this room, and we'll discuss potential publications. Okay, so see you there, and thank you very much. Oh, okay. Yeah.